$4,000 a year. That is the average American household's annual cost for the most prescribed class of cardiovascular drugs on this planet. Not the surgery, not the hospital stay, not the stent, just the pills. Just to keep your heart beating at a rate your cardiologist calls acceptable. There is a plant. It does not cost $4,000. It does not cost $400. It does not cost $4. It costs exactly nothing. The United States National Library of Medicine has 14 separate clinical trials on this plant, documenting what it does to the human cardiovascular system. Not 12, not 13, 14. In 2008, the Cochrane Database published a meta-analysis of those 14 trials. The Cochrane Database, the highest standard of medical evidence on this planet. The conclusion was not ambiguous. It was not a trend. It was not a preliminary finding pending further study. It was a result. And in the 15 years since that result was published, the cardiovascular drug market grew from under $50 billion a year to nearly $150 billion. The Cochrane study did not slow that number, not by 1%. There is a reason for that. That reason has a name. And by the time this video ends, you will understand exactly how it works. James Whitfield is 69 years old. He spent 34 years as a construction foreman in Knoxville, Tennessee. For 22 of those years, he took lisinopril and metoprolol every morning before leaving the house, before the sun came up, before coffee, before a single word to his wife. Pills first, then the world. His cardiologist told him in 2001 that his blood pressure was managed. That word, not healed, not reversed, not resolved, managed, like a problem that has no solution, like something you carry until you die. In year 14 of treatment, his kidney function began declining. Standard, expected, documented. ACE inhibitors do this at a well-studied rate. His cardiologist adjusted the dosage. The kidney decline slowed. The blood pressure did not improve. The average American cardiovascular patient currently takes 4 separate medications to manage a condition, not resolve it. One plant addressed this condition for 1,300 years before any of those molecules were synthesized. James Whitfield had never heard of it. It was growing in the median of the highway he drove to work every single day for 34 years. The world where this plant was truly understood begins in the year 659 AD, in the court of Emperor Gaozong, in a room where the most powerful physicians on this planet were compiling the first government-sanctioned pharmacopoeia in human history. Imagine that room. Stone floors, ink brushes moving across paper, 850 medicinal substances, classified, verified, cross-referenced by the most advanced medical institution on this planet. One entry: a small thorned tree, red berries in autumn, white flowers in spring, used for circulation, used for the chest, used for what we now call the heart. They were not guessing. They were recording what they already knew. Tang Materia Medica, 659 AD. That is not the beginning of this plant's story. That is simply the first time someone had the institutional authority to write it down. Before Tang China, Hawthorn was field medicine across the Eurasian continent. From Rome to the Byzantine Empire, military physicians recorded it as standard medicine for soldiers on extended campaigns. In 12th century Europe, it appeared in official pharmacopoeias as a cardiac remedy. Not folk remedy. Official. Institutionally documented. Before a single beta blocker existed. In 2022, researchers at Frontiers in Pharmacology, a peer-reviewed journal independent of pharmaceutical sponsorship, identified the primary cardiovascular mechanism. The compound is called hyperoside. It is present in measurable concentrations in hawthorn leaves and berries. Hyperoside activates an enzyme called ENOS, the enzyme that tells your blood vessel walls to relax. Pressure drops, not theoretically. 110 patients, 16 weeks, randomized controlled. The Hawthorn group showed statistically significant blood pressure reduction. The control group did not. That trial is sitting on a server at the U.S. National Library of Medicine right now. Fully accessible. No paywall. Nobody told your cardiologist to read it. The same research team, permanently archived in the U.S. National Library of Medicine, identified 9 genes that Hawthorn extract directly regulates. One of those genes is ACE2, the same molecular target as lisinopril, the same lock, a different key. A key this family of plants has carried for thousands of years, in every berry, every leaf, every bark, on every inhabited continent, before any laboratory synthesized a single molecule. In 2024, the Journal of Ethnopharmacology published a review of 71 years of Hawthorn research, 337 distinct chemical compounds identified. Cardiovascular protection, confirmed. Anti-inflammatory effects, confirmed. Liver protection, confirmed. Toxicity documented across 71 years of data, 0. The author's formal conclusion, non-toxic. And then this line, read it carefully. Lack of correlative research. 71 years, 337 compounds, 0 toxicity. And the scientific conclusion is, we need more research. The ACE inhibitor market, the drug class that includes lisinopril, generates over $12 billion in annual sales. Lisinopril is the most prescribed drug in that category. Hawthorn's compounds hit the same molecular target. One requires a prescription. One does not. Lisinopril causes kidney function decline in long-term users. Hawthorn. 0 documented toxicity across 71 years. One of these molecules can be patented. One of them cannot. That is not a coincidence. That is a business model. That ancient family of trees is already here. Hawthorn. 200 species, growing in every state in this country. Some arrived with European settlers. Some were already here, thousands of years before any settler set foot on this soil. Same genus, same active compounds, same mechanism, different journeys to the same American hedgerow. And every one of those journeys led to the same conclusion your cardiologist was never trained to reach. The Cherokee knew its name. The Iroquois knew its name. The Crow, whose elders called it the old people's medicine, used it specifically for what we now call heart failure and arthritis. 3 separate indigenous nations independently identified this plant's cardiovascular effect, documented it, preserved it across hundreds of generations, before a single pharmaceutical research budget existed on this continent. That is not mythology. That is ethnobotanical record, permanently archived in the peer-reviewed scientific record. No prescription, no copay. This is what free looks like. The plant is on the other side of your windshield right now. The white flowers come in April. The red berries come in September. Anyone can identify it. Anyone. Now the money. The global cardiovascular drug market in 2024 is worth $149 billion. Not total pharmaceutical revenue. Not all drug categories combined. Just heart drugs. Just this one category. $149 billion. Antihypertensive drugs. Blood pressure pills. The exact category Hawthorn directly addresses. $56 billion. Per year. Not to cure high blood pressure. To manage it. For life. Because managed patients are lifetime customers. And lifetime customers are the foundation of the business model. Jardiance, one of the fastest growing cardiovascular drugs in America, over $8 billion last year, globally. In the United States alone, $4.5 billion. One drug, One molecule. 1 year. Hawthorn and Jardiance are both protecting the same organ. One works through your kidneys. One works through your arterial walls. One requires a prescription. One requires September. One costs nothing. There is a third industry. It does not sell drugs. It sells the condition drugs treat. The processed food industry in America. $260 billion a year. Products that elevate blood pressure, stiffen arteries, harden the cardiovascular system. 1 decade at a time. They create the condition. The drug industry manages the condition. The plant in the hedgerow competes with both. It is free. It cannot be advertised on prime-time television. It cannot be patented. They did not bury this plant because it didn't work. They buried it because it worked for free. They buried it because free does not generate $56 billion in annual recurring revenue. They buried it because your independence is their liability. When a compound cannot be patented, it cannot generate a return on research investment. When it cannot generate a return, it does not get studied. When it does not get studied, it does not get prescribed. When it does not get prescribed, it does not exist. The standard American medical school curriculum dedicates 140 hours to pharmacology. It dedicates 0 hours to plants that cannot generate a return on research investment. That is not an oversight. That is allocation. You do not need a prescription. You do not need a laboratory. What you need is this: a pair of eyes, a pair of hands. An April afternoon, when the white blossoms appear on thorned branches along roadsides and forest edges and highway medians across every state in this country. That is all. The traditional preparation is a simple water infusion. 1 tablespoon of dried hawthorn berries or leaves, 8 ounces of water, just off boil. Steep 15 minutes. The Cherokee used this preparation. The Tang dynasty used this preparation. Your great-grandmother's generation knew this without being taught. Your generation was instructed to buy a pill instead. The preparation takes 3 minutes. The cost is 0. The documentation behind it spans 1,300 years across 3 continents and 14 randomized controlled trials. You are not doing something fringe. You are not doing something alternative. You are doing something ancient. Something that was systematically replaced, not because something better was found, but because something profitable was invented. James Whitfield found a hawthorn tree in the median of the highway he had driven for 34 years. He had passed it hundreds of times. He knew it was a tree. He did not know it was a pharmacy. He does now. You are not a patient. You are not a consumer. You are not a lifetime revenue stream. You can walk outside today, identify this plant, and reclaim a piece of knowledge that 1,300 years of human civilization considered essential. 1 century of pharmaceutical economics tried to erase it. They didn't finish the job. Your grandparents didn't have a cardiologist on speed dial. They had a hedgerow. They had seasonal knowledge passed hand to hand across generations. That knowledge didn't disappear. It was buried. You are digging it back up. Go outside. Look for thorned branches with small, deeply lobed leaves. In April, white blossoms. Almond scent. You will smell it before you see it. In September, dark red berry clusters. Dense, unmistakable. Photograph what you find. Drop it in the comments. Every plant you identify is a data point. Every harvest you make is a declaration. You are not waiting for permission to know what your ancestors already knew. The next video in this series is about a plant the United States Army carried into combat. Not the pharmaceutical division, the infantry. Frontline soldiers carried it in their field kits because no antibiotic had been invented yet. When penicillin was discovered in 1928, that plant was removed from military medical manuals within 15 years. Gone. Removed. replaced by a molecule a pharmaceutical company could sell. And in clinical trials conducted 60 years after that removal, published in peer-reviewed journals, it outperformed 2 categories of modern prescription antibiotics. 2 categories. The military buried this plant in the same decade the antibiotic industry was born. That is not a coincidence. That plant is growing in your backyard right now. That story is next. You already know more than they want you to know. Keep going.